Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Higher Journeys. I am your host, of course, Alexis Brooks, and I am so delighted to be back with you once again with a brand new guest and someone that I know you're going to love. You're going to love her because she's got, well, yeah, we were just talking offline. People love storytelling, right? People love to tell stories and they love to hear them. Well, I have a story for you. I have a story for you that I'm going to turn over to my guest. Her name is Heather Noel. She's a lovely, lovely woman with so many things to share. And Heather, first of all, let me just say welcome. First time
Thank
on Higher Journeys. We're happy to have you here.
thank you.
I
I'm
want to
delighted
begin.
to be here.
I am delighted you are here because the story that you have is, I call it Journeyers, the improbable journey, because, we think of life as having uh, um, steps that we can see. We know that there are always unforeseen circumstances and curves that we don't expect to take, but this is a curve that Heather's going to share with you that you probably would never expect. So without further ado, Heather, I want you to go into your improbable journey and where it started. And I believe it was the 70s. You were 19 years
Mhm.
old,
Yep.
living in Texas. Tell us what happened.
Okay. Well, before I tell you this, I want to say one quick thing because this is a near-death experience.
Hmm.
And I just want to clarify that in the 70s was when the book came out, Life After Life,
Correct.
and people started talking about life after death. I didn't hear about this until the 80s, but all of the people that are talking now about near-death experiences, for the most part, are people who actually physically died.
Mhm.
And I believe that this was kind of taken away. I was doing the research. I'm not going to get into this, but I just want to say that this was truly a near-death experience. I didn't die, but I just wanted to clarify that so that if anyone was like, oh, well, did she die? Well, I didn't, but I'm very glad I didn't. But anyhow, here's what happened. I actually grew up in Illinois and I was going to the University of Illinois, and my best friend had been doing door-to-door book sales the year before, and for a company called Southwestern. And so she's like, oh, come sell with me. And she was in Texas, and everybody goes through a week-long training slash a little bit of brainwashing kind of thing. And so you're just rah, rah, rah the minute you get out of there, and you can't wait to start going out and selling. So I get to Texas, and the first day I'm there, my sales manager takes me in her car from Paris, Texas, down to a little town called Cooper, which is called Cooper in Texas. And she dropped me off and said, okay, sell all day long and then hitchhike home tonight. And now I'm 19, and I have to tell you, I grew up with horses. I grew up in the country. I was pretty fearless. I, had 1,000-pound animals I dealt with. So I had no fears at all. And I would walk home in the dark. So I was like, okay, I'll go home. I'll be sure I'm on the road while it's light. And as I'm going through trying to sell my books, and people would start to talk to me, and I'd say, oh yeah, I'm hitching a ride home. They're like, are you insane? Do you know where you are? And now, mind you, the town where I grew up in was called Cary. It was 45 miles northwest of Chicago. It was so tiny that there were no ethnic minorities. I had zero prejudice and zero comprehension of what prejudice was all about at all, nothing. And so I had no intentions of, I was going to be very careful, pick the right car. Well, I went back to the place where she dropped me off, which was right off the main square of the town. It was a straight shot from Paris to the square. And I'm standing there, and I get there at 5:30 at night. At 10 o'clock, I was still standing there, and nobody, not one person, had driven out of the town. And I didn't find out until the next day that a highway had been built around the town. And I was from such a small town that never even occurred to me that there was any place else. I just thought, gosh, nobody goes anywhere. So we were taught not to call home. I was not given a phone number or an address where I lived. And I just didn't know what to do. And I was 19. So at one point, these two black men pulled up. This guy opened the door. He goes, "Hey, you want to ride?" And I'm thinking, and they said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to Paris." They said, "Oh, we're going to Paris. We'll give you a ride." So the guy opened the door. It was a two-door car. And he leaned forward for me to get in back. And I just plopped down right next to him, put my sales kit in my lap. And they started driving out of town. And then the guy turned left. And now, of course, it's pitch black. And I literally opened the door. I'm dragging my foot on the ground, going, "Wait, stop, I'm
Wow.
going to Paris." And he's like, "What's the matter with you, girl? I'm going to Paris." And I went, and I pulled the door closed because he was going faster and faster. There was no way. I pulled the door closed, and I have a whole background in acting. So I just went, "Oh, well, thank goodness. I thought you were going the wrong way." And I just started playing along. And the guy sitting next to me was going, "Hey, baby, give me a little sugar." And I went, "This guy really this desperate? I mean, couldn't you set him up with somebody else like that?"
Right.
I mean,
I'm going to stop you right there. So at this point, because this is a full story, guys, at this point, when you said what you said, you knew something was going on and you just
oh,
kicked
yeah.
in.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, the
Okay.
minute I tried to jump out the door, I knew. I
Mhm.
knew exactly what was going on.
Okay.
But my reaction was to not panic. That was my initial reaction was don't panic, just play along with this. It was really quick, right?
Mhm.
Well, they chatted with me for a little bit, didn't get anywhere, and they're going 80 miles an hour.
Mm.
And now I'm starting to really get how the situation that I'm in. And I've lived in cities, well, not really lived in a city, but I've been in cities before. And I always thought that it was scary to be in the city. That is nothing compared to be in the country, where there are little dirt roads that are every few miles so that the tractors can go. And so, and this was high season in terms of the corn was high. If they had pulled off at any moment, no one would see me. No one would see the car. No one would know it happened to me. So I'm aware of this. And as I'm sitting there, they just went, both of them went silent. They weren't talking to me, they weren't talking to each other, and they were just going 80 miles an hour. And there was nothing. In fact, the two houses I saw were a quarter of a mile off the road. They were these ranch houses, and that was it. And there was nothing out there. And I didn't know when they were going to do something. And I just suddenly felt this energy wash through my body. And I have to tell you, I was raised in metaphysics. And so my concept of God was based on the idea of God being principle, mind, soul, spirit, life, truth, and love. So all spiritual. There was no guilt and shame and nothing in my background. So I always had this beautiful understanding of God as love. And this feeling moved through my body in a way I had never felt it in my life.
Wow.
And I felt completely this expansive, like a gold radiant energy in my body. And then a voice said very directly into my mind, "Love them. Just love them." And so I sat there and I just focused all my energy on love. And I began to imagine them being loved as children, having this loving relationship with people, being just love, like I just surrounded them. And but I was sitting there doing this, and you know, I thought that they were driving for 20 minutes, but when I was thinking about this, because I hadn't really thought about it for a while, when they finally, here's what happened. They drove for, I would say, probably at least 40 minutes. They came to a T in the road. It was Paris to the right, something else was left. They turned left. I didn't say a word. And now, now I know that like this part of me is like, "Oh, please, please, please let them turn right," because they really are good people, So now I have to really redouble my efforts to be in this
Mm.
place of love. And
Right.
so I'm there again. They come again to another T, and there was the first house that I saw, and we had been traveling for probably an hour because I remember that, okay, they slowed down to go left. And because they had no idea that I had no resistance, I wasn't panicked, nothing. And I was able to literally jump out the door, and they didn't expect it because I didn't act like there was a problem. And so the one guy who was sitting next to me tried to hold on to me, but I heard the driver, as I'm jumping out the door, I heard him say, "Let her go."
Mhm.
And to this day, I do not remember. I remember jumping from the car and I remember running, and I have no memory of landing. Just like I'm running. That was it. So there was some kind of shock in there. But when I went to the door of this house and I pounded on the door, and they, thank goodness they were awake, they let me in, and basically, you know, I still wanted to believe. I was just that naive. I'm pointing in the direction where these guys are like, I go, "Can you tell it's Paris?"
My goodness.
And they said, "No, hon, there's nothing out there until the main highway." So they were taking me out somewhere to some main highway. Who knows what the plan was? But um, that that was my experience.
Yeah.
And because my body was so in this state of, "You're going to die, Heather. You are going to die," that it was really amazing to just have this energy fill up in my body and feel it. But there's something I haven't told you yet, because I ended up leaving and going to Florida to stay with an aunt of mine who lived in Jacksonville Beach. And she was just a very kind person. She wasn't a real aunt, but everyone called her Aunt Clara. And so anyhow, I was staying with her. And I had been there once before, and I used to walk on the beach all the time. And this one day I went out, and I'm from Illinois. So I've seen, well, this was an unusual thing. They had what's called a shore break, which is like a 10-foot wave that's right off the shore. Like you could just swim right out there and be in it. And, I had seen people on surfboards in those things. I'm like, want to go swim in that. So I started swimming out there. And as you can imagine, I got caught up in the undertow, and it would pull me out, and then the wave would crash over and I'd drop down. And it kept doing that over and over and over. And then this same love energy filled up my body
Mm.
again. And I literally felt this peace and this love and this absolute conviction that I was not going to die. Even if my body died, I knew I was not going
Mhm.
to die. And I was in this state of love where I truly didn't care. I just didn't care. And not in a, like, I don't care about my life, but just like, this is great. I love
Right.
how this
I would
feels,
call it a neutral space. So I'm going to interject because you've got so
Yeah.
much here. So we've segued from one scenario where this all pervading frequency of love is what I would say, Heather, came over you, which literally saved your life. And now we're cutting to another improbable
Right.
situation where this identical, so it was replicated, right? So, Heather, let's continue down this road. You obviously are dealing with. Um, very, very dire circumstances, but this all pervading energy that we're calling love, a frequency of love, has taken you over and once again saved you. Continue with the story with what happened in the water.
Well, you have to understand that when this is happening, if you've most people happily haven't had this experience, but it gets overwhelming really fast, because the minute you get up and have the opportunity to get some air, it's going over you and push, and it doesn't just, it is so huge that it pushes you down into the water. And by the way, this was very unusual in Florida, but it happens obviously because it did. In any case, this feeling of love just took over, and I would take a breath, and then I just flowed with it, like if I got pushed down, I didn't fight at all, and I was really 100% okay with whatever was going to happen. It just,
Mhm.
that feeling of love had me also feeling that whatever happened was perfect. And that was the energy I was in. I was feeling that love again, and I was so happy to feel it again. And literally, within about 10 minutes, I was literally pushed back into shore, pushed in. I did not swim. It pushed me back. And I looked at this later, and apparently there are like, there can be circular things going on. I don't really understand it,
Mm,
but it was pretty amazing because I
absolutely.
did nothing. I did nothing. And that is one of the things I have learned. If you're in a really intensive, fearful situation, don't try to push against it. Go
Absolutely. Well,
with
it's
it.
just like a riptide, right? They say
Yep.
you swim with the tide, not against it. I have to bring something up. This is just incredibly powerful, Heather, and obviously I'm very curious as to why certain individuals have these experiences where they magnetize these sorts of scenarios only to overcome them and learn something from them. Obviously, you're going to share with our audience what you've learned and what you're sharing with others, which is incredible. But these two incidents remind me of a story that was told to me by an individual named Michael J.S. Carter. He's an experiencer, we would say, in the ET UFO realm, who tells a story of having a gun pulled on him many years ago in New York City. He was comparing that to the fear that he has had with contact encounters, but he said the only thing that gave him more fear was when he was mugged and a gun was pulled on him, at close range, gun to his head, literally.
Mhm.
But Heather, what he described is so similar to what you described, is almost this sustained sense of, it's almost a neutrality. It's a feeling of just complete letting go. They say let go and let God. But he said that some people describe things moving in slow motion. But for him, he described it almost as a blissful state
Yep.
of complete detachment and full trust. Would
Yep.
you describe your situation to be
Oh yeah.
similar?
It's
Okay.
exactly what it felt like. And there's one other thing that happened on the beach I want to share with you. And this was such a beautiful thing to me because I used to just walk on the beach at night. I was, like I said, completely fearless. And my aunt was always panicked. but but she would just like pray for me. And she didn't tell me that I shouldn't do that, because I was old enough to do what I wanted. But after my Texas experience, I would stay in the light. Like if I went out at night, I was always under streetlights. And one night I got caught up in the moonlight and I'm walking down the beach. Now this is 1977. And there were no houses at this point built on the beach where I ended up walking. And all of a sudden I hear a man's voice calling. And I'm looking down the beach, and I'm looking around me, and there's nobody. I mean nobody anywhere near me. And there's no houses. And I look ahead and I think it, and then I see this shape in the laying on the sand, and the water's washing up around it. And I think some guy is calling his dog. And then I realize it's a man, and he's calling me, and he's saying, I've been kidnapped. Please call the police. And I kid you not, there were bushes along the side, and I was waiting for someone to jump out. But because he didn't ask me to come and help him, I felt like totally compelled. So I walked up to
Mhm.
him, and it was a very large black man. I mean, not fat, but tall, like a big guy. He was laying on his side with his hands, his wrists, and his ankles were tied together.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. And I immediately untied him and helped him. He could barely walk. And he said, I can't tell you too much, but I'm so grateful to you for saving my life. And let me just tell you what happened. And basically what I gathered from what he told me was he was from Detroit, Michigan, and he had testified in court. So I'm assuming it was something to do with the mafia. Like I said, he didn't give me details, but part of the deal for him was he had to join the military. And he did, and he was stationed in Jacksonville. And I think he had just gone through basic training, and I don't know where that was, but this is where he's now stationed. And he was just out at some little, normal thing that you do on the street where there were a lot of people around. And he was literally just thrown into a trunk, put into a boat, taken out to the ocean where he couldn't even see the shore.
My goodness.
They tied him up and threw him into the ocean. And I thought about that. I thought, well, why wouldn't they kill him? But you see, they wanted to torture him. What a great way to torture somebody than to
Absolutely.
tie them up. And he couldn't swim, he couldn't do anything, but somehow he ended up on the beach, being washed into shore.
Did he explain how he ended up on the beach? Out
No,
of the water?
he was just literally pushed in. He couldn't get up, he couldn't move. The water had literally pushed him onto the
Carried
beach.
him in like with you.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask this question, my dear. I'm trying to find the right word to describe the life that you've lived. I'm tempted to call it a charmed life. Some descriptions are without words, but and this is not the first time I've spoken with Heather. We've had I think a couple of conversations at this point, but clearly there is a pattern of magic that's happening in your life and there's a purpose. So I really do, we want to hear all the stories, but I want to get to how you have used these amazingly powerful stories to help others, but continue on. But I had to add that, Heather, because I do believe that there are certain people that come here. I feel that we all have purpose. There's meaning, whatever life may bring, there's purpose and meaning to one's life. But with some like yourself, there are clearly hallmarks of you're here to help others vis-a-vis these incredibly powerful experiences that you've had. Now, you saved somebody's life. Look what's happened.
Yeah,
And who knows how
yeah.
you've changed those two young men that kidnapped you in Texas at the age of 19. Will never
Well,
know how it may have changed their life and their pattern. So I just had to
right.
put my 2 cents
Yeah.
worth in there.
And it's a good point. And part of what occurred to me when I was loving them was I realized that probably the reason that they kept driving with me was when they abducted me, it was a spontaneous thing. It wasn't planned. And all of a sudden, this is my belief that most likely the driver suddenly realized the position he was in. He didn't want to look bad with his friend. And if they did anything to me or harmed me, they would have to kill me. And everybody knew this. Like this was not, like at that time in the 70s in Texas, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I feel that, you could see that love had embraced everybody, that the driver was probably relieved rather than trying, that they could have gotten me back in the car and taken off before anyone could do anything, but they
Hmm.
didn't. And so it was I know that this guy was saved from doing something he probably didn't want to do, truly.
Absolutely.
So anyhow, but the thing that really that I was aware of is that nothing changed in terms of how I saw people. I have always loved people. And I would say that one of the things that first of all, it takes a long time to look back and see these things. Like I didn't make like what you're seeing right now. That's not how it feels. But I didn't do drama. I never saw myself as a victim ever.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because of that, that's probably the reason that it looks like I lived a charmed life. And I have more things to tell you about this. But I really want to help people listening to this make this connection. A lot of times people avoid things because they're afraid. And if you feel genuine, like I knew I was in that place for a reason. I knew that everything was happening for a reason.
Hmm.
And when you recognize that and then you respond, this is what I came to 100% believe is that there is literally nothing going on here but love.
Hmm.
And anything else you experience, you bring it in through, and I'm going to say this because not many people understand this, so you can ask me if this doesn't make sense. But basically, once you understand that you are imagining everything into reality. So I didn't imagine these guys picking me up and taking me into the country, but I I had a stronger imagination that I would be protected no matter what,
Hmm.
right? I wasn't in a state of mind that was like, oh my gosh, and I'm so scared. I wasn't like that. I was like, no, I am not a victim. I will, you know what I mean? I had this really strong energy around that. And
Absolutely.
mhm.
I
And
resonate with
so
that. I absolutely
Yeah.
resonate with that. I have to interject. Oh my God, this is such a great conversation. So many directions. And I know you've worked with this idea of really using imagination to bring things into manifestation. I want to get into that. I want to touch on a French philosopher by the name of Henri Corbin, who talked about the imaginal realm as opposed to imaginary. Imaginal, he believed, was a dimension that we can literally procure from to create, to bring into this third density to create different scenarios. I mean, this is really perennial philosophy, and it's something that I think that you do. I agree with you 100%, but continue.
Okay, so I very quickly, because I think what happens is that when you're willing to be in a state of mind that is about love, you get more opportunities to see these things happen. And so what happened was, after I was in Florida, I actually went to acting school in London, and I came back and I went to Minneapolis and I got a job at the Guthrie Theater as an actress and singer. And I was a very good belted out singer, right? So, and I went with some of my friends to it. They were going to a gay bar and they're like, "Come with us." And so I went, and it was this building where you couldn't tell that it was a bar. It looked like a deserted building, so you had to know it was there. And so we went in and we danced, and we left, and I was with four of them, but it was 20 below zero and it was Minnesota in January. And so I'm hustling down the sidewalk ahead of them, and I'm about a half a block ahead, and the four of them are just, chatting and walking along. I come around the corner, and a black man and two Indians come out of a doorway, and the black man had a knife in his hand, and he goes, "I'm going to cut your throat, white bitch." And I went,
Oh my
"Could be,
God.
who knows, there's something due any day." And that was my response. That was my response. It never occurred to me to be a victim. And I'm dancing down the sidewalk, and I literally heard this guy go, "Shit." Like, as I'm dancing, I don't know if
Oh
they're
my.
behind me. So I'm dancing, I'm singing. I get to the end of the block, I turn around, and here are these three men. So they're standing like this, facing me. My four friends are like this, standing right behind them. And I don't think they even knew that my friends were standing there. I turn around and I go, "Are you guys coming? Come on." And the three of them moved aside, and my friends walked right through. Now, at this point, I knew I was onto something. I knew it. I was like,
How old
I
were you
did,
at this point, Heather?
I
How
was,
old were you?
I was 21.
So all of these things that you're telling us happened in the span of about 3 years?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And so, but it happened again because I moved from Minneapolis to Chicago. And this time I was on the north side of Chicago. It was this tiny street. It was weird. It like there were no people on the street. It was 7 p.m. Nobody was on the street, pitch black. No shops were open, nothing. And a black man is walking across the street from me backwards. And I'm wearing a mink coat. It was $100 at a resale shop, but it looked great in the dark. He's walking backwards, and I'm like, I know what to do. I start singing. I'm going, "Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match." And I'm going around the corner going, "Heather, you picked the wrong song. I can't believe you did that." So I'm dancing down the street. And again, I turn around, he's gone. And now I have this incredible knowledge that I am untouchable. And I'll tell you why. Because I refuse to see myself as a victim. And think about it. Don't victims always act like victims?
Absolutely.
Right? If I went to, you know, be in a TV show and I'm supposed to be a victim and I did that, they go, "I'm sorry, you got to go." And I'm like, "No, no, but this really works."
I think
So,
you're onto something, Heather, but
yeah,
I have to ask this question. It's unavoidable.
okay,
And I don't know whether they say that there's no such thing as coincidence. I believe that synchronicity is a very real phenomenon. However,
yeah,
you've given us at this point one, two, three, maybe four scenarios, all of them very dramatic that could have ended with dire consequences. Why were in every case an African American male involved? do you think?
I don't know
Other
because you know
than,
what? I have, and I don't say I mean African American because I lived in London and you know there are a lot of people who are not African Americans and that's why I say black as opposed to like
well,
and I
I'm
would
just
call
using that
myself
sort of
white.
colloquial,
Yeah,
yeah,
but I just wanted to
people of
explain
color.
that. But you know, yeah, yeah. But you know what's really interesting is and maybe you have some thoughts about this. My daughter and I, she's 27 now, we were thinking about this. We have some of our best friends, a friend in Bali, my friend who I told you about, who his name is Leo. He was in the show that I was in, Love Island.
Love Island, a
This was
reality
18
TV
years
show.
ago.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was the astrologer. I was doing couples astrology on the show. Now, Leo's black. He's an amazing guy, and we have been friends all this time. For 18 years, we're still friends. And my daughter and I were like, there it's interesting that these and our other friend who is also black in Bali, they are two of our closest friends. And then we have another friend, Kevin, and they're and I'm like, what is it that these men are so interested at such a deep level? Because as you can imagine, I don't talk about metaphysics on a surface level. And I get down to it with people and I go, this is how you solve the problem. And they were like, really? How do you do that? And that's how I became friends with Leo. Now he's 20 years younger than I am. And he was this, hot guy and all these hot girls. He got kicked off the show. We happened to meet in the hotel. And the minute I started telling him about his astrology and about himself, he was all ears. And there were people trying to save him from me. I kid you not. Like the producer, like, are you okay, Leo? Like, is this woman bothering you? And he's like,
I
I
love
can handle things. Don't worry about it. And we went, like, he would take me places with him and have these, like, moments where, for instance, I'll just give you an example about, and I'm talking about this open-mindedness. This is what I found. And I haven't found other men who I've come across that had this interest, including my own husband. He was like, give me 5 minutes and then, okay, babe, I got to go take a nap, But these guys were like, this is awesome. We want to understand this, right?
yeah.
And I'll tell you more about Leo some other time. But he was like that. He was all about whatever I had to say. He wanted to know, and he would implement it on the spot.
Mhm.
Okay, I will give you this example, okay, because it'll help everybody. So he's telling me in the car. He's saying, Heather, my manager, I think, but for being, he was an actor and all that, and he was in music. And he said, my manager wants me to come back to the UK to audition for something and do whatever. And it wasn't an audition, it was something he was actually going to be hired to do. But the show had come up with something really funny for Leo to do because he is hilarious. And so they had this kind of show that was going on the side, even though he'd been kicked off the island. And he said, I don't know what to do. And he's completely stressing out about it. And I said, Leo, let me ask you something. I said, what do you want to do? He goes, well, I want to stay. And I said, okay, so if you don't go back, what's going to happen? He goes, I said, are you gonna get in trouble? Are they gonna fire you? Are you, I laid all these scenarios. He said, no, no, no. And I said, well, then just stay. And he's like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm staying, like that. And it was just instant. And
Yeah.
when I talked to him the other day, so 18 years later, he told me, he says, I have remembered that for 18 years. That's
Wow.
how much of an impression it made on me. So I don't know why color was involved, but the point that I saw was it never changed my love of people. It never,
Could have been a test. We
no,
don't know. It's just an
who knows?
interesting continuity. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a sticking point, but if you look at everything that happens in one's life, nuanced or specific, and you see a pattern, it would make me want to look into that a little deeper, but perhaps you have the
Yeah.
answer. Listen, we have a finite period of time and a lot still to get in, my friend. So, what
Mhm.
I want to do, I want to go back to a very specific point you made at the top of our episode where you made a very affirmative statement about what we know as the near death experience or NDE. And now, when you
Mhm.
and I had a conversation about a week ago, you made that a very, very strong argument or sticking point in terms of what denotes a near-death experience versus an after-death experience. I'd like you to talk about that a little bit as it relates. And I know you touched on it, having
Yeah.
to do with both your Texas kidnapping experience as well as the near drowning experience. But go ahead and make that juxtaposition for us and draw a nexus, if you will, or a distinction. I loved what you had to say when we were chatting offline.
Well, I actually went into Chat GPT this morning and had a big long conversation about this.
Don't you just love ChatGPT?
I love Chat GPT. Oh my gosh. So basically what I talked about was I said, so I'm talking about science and I've heard you talk before, and I know that you feel free to fill in any scientific words because I kind of go, and basically what I said was, why do they call it near death? And it had this kind of blah, blah, blah reason. I said, but wait a minute, this isn't near death. These are people who have died. They are dead. So isn't that term inaccurate? And ChatGPT said, yes, it is. And so I said, what would you call it? And basically, here's what happens. They are so okay. This is such a big topic. You're gonna have to rein me in, but let me just try to explain
That's
it.
okay. I'll rein you in.
Okay.
Come on. Go ahead, Heather. Go ahead, girlfriend.
So here's the only thing that science can study is stuff that they can prove the existence of it. Now, this is a very interesting issue for them because they cannot prove the existence of consciousness.
That's right.
Okay. So now that means they cannot study or disprove or prove anything that happens once a person has died or even before they die because it's in consciousness, right? So they can't talk about it. So let's suppose, and this is what Chat GP and I both got to eventually. Let's suppose that in the 70s, and I don't have to suppose this part. I'm telling you, I was there, so I remember this. There was this huge opening around people having the experience of dying and what happened, right? So many people wanted to know. And a lot of people were getting away from religion, but this was a new area that people were like, wow, I want to know more about this. Well, in the mid 80s, all of a sudden it becomes called a near death experience. Now, the company line would be, well, the scientists wanted to study it, and so they had to call it near death and da da da. But it's actually not true because when I talked to GPT, I said, well, what would you call this? Because basically what they can study is they study the brain up to, and it's got brain chemistry going on, right? It can study the brain up to the moment of death. Then they can study the brain after, and what did they call it? Revival. So that's what GPT said. So we have death and then we have revival. So up to death and then after revival, they can study the brain. But they never are able to look at the experience. But what they can do instead, and I believe most likely this was to take people's attention off of what is reality really.
Wow.
And what is God. Now, notice this when people are when they talk about, I'm going to call it a life after death experience. I refuse to call it an NDE unless they didn't die.
Yeah.
Okay. How many people have you heard who come back who either didn't believe in God or they didn't have a good relationship with God or they thought they had a good relationship with God, but now they're talking about God? And you know how God is one of those things like we don't talk about God. We have to find another word, And I have had, do you want to call it the universe? I don't care. But what I notice is how these people will just say God. Right. God, Jesus, you name it, they felt it. And they're talking about this, right? Now, what science did by making it a near-death experience, they're saying, well, you couldn't have died, right? Isn't that, otherwise it wouldn't be near death. So they're basically saying this person didn't really die. And we're going to tell you the chemistry that was going on in their brain. And it's just going, well, and it kind of, the chemistry caused them to have this experience, but they didn't die, right? Okay. And so it takes away this experience that they've had by making it into something quantifiable. They're going,
Hmm.
well, it isn't real, but let me explain something about science. And I've just been learning this in the last few weeks. Science does not believe in God, love, imagination,
Absolutely.
creativity,
Right.
anything that makes us human. They don't believe in it. And so they literally sidestep it. And they call anything, this is called the forbidden question, is the question about, well, how can you use your consciousness to study something and then deny that consciousness exists because you're
Absolutely.
studying?
I can tell you, Heather, an interview that I did with a gentleman you may know, Nassim Haramein, who is a
Mhm.
physicist, peer-reviewed, has written peer-reviewed papers, et cetera. And we had a conversation, gosh, 4 or 5 years ago on location in Los Angeles, in which we were talking about consciousness, having to do with, we were talking about people that have had serious brain injuries, but were still able to function with very little gray matter in the brain. Okay.
Right.
However, in that conversation, he talked about not so many years ago, you could not go to a science conference and even bring up what we call the C word without getting almost kicked out. So, it's this annihilation of even considering that consciousness is a factor in their studies. I
Yeah,
think it's even deeper than the fact that they don't believe in it. They can't quantify it.
that's right.
They can't replicate it. First, they can't define it, but they certainly can't replicate it, and therefore it's off the table because they don't have the instruments to measure it. So,
Do you want to jump a little deeper into this?
well, we've got a lot more to cover, and we're running
Okay.
short on time, my friend. We're going to
Okay.
have you back again, though. How about that?
Okay.
Because listen, guys, and I'm talking to my audience as well. We've gone down so many rabbit holes, Heather, and it's just it really is, forgive the cliche, but it's an endless and yet connected journey. All of the things that we're talking about. I want to touch on your ideas on simulation theory. And then I also want to culminate in some of the amazing work that you're doing with others, taking all this life experience with this brilliant mind of yours and how you've been helping others. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit.
Okay.
I actually want to go into your ideas because I think this is a good segue to
Okay.
talk about your thoughts on what we call a simulated reality, simulation
That's
theory.
what
And
I wanted to tell you about. This is perfect.
well,
That's where I was
perfect.
going.
See, there we go.
Okay. I was I was raised in Christian Science and I left the religion, but as I said, I was raised with this beautiful understanding of God. But there were two things that, so Mary Baker Eddy is the woman who wrote this book called Science and Health.
Absolutely.
It was published in 1875. And in 1875, she said, there is no matter and there is no death. Okay. Now, she was a phenomenal healer, and many of her students were as well. And a lot of people don't know this, but her book became the second most popular book in the world. It was
Hmm.
second only to the Bible. It was
I'm
a huge
familiar with it.
movement.
It's on my bookshelf because my father studied it, and I grew up learning about Mary Baker Eddy. Absolutely.
Oh, we're going to have fun. Okay. So okay, I have to say, I have to throw in one thing really quick and then we'll get back to this. But I eventually really wanted young people to understand how this world works. And I thought the best way to do it was to write a story. And so I did. And in this context, Earth is a virtual reality. You're born into the program. Your body is your avatar and your biocomputer. Now, here's the piece that just came in. Like, I was writing this as a fun fictional story, like not thinking, I really didn't really understand. I was like, great idea. But here's how the binary code works. In a computer, it's zeros and ones, right? On and off, on and off. Well, in this story, your body is your biocomputer, and the binary code is created by feelings of love or fear. And so you are literally seeing what you believe. And it won't be like when you dream, you don't think what you're going to dream, but there's no question that what you dream is coming right up out of the subconscious, because you will recognize that, oh, I'm feeling fear in this dream, or I'm feeling happy in this dream, or whatever it is, but it's something that you're familiar with. That's what you've been feeling, right? And so I didn't think much of it. I thought I was really clever. And then when I'm writing this story, I'm weaving in all these quantum physics to make my point. And the more I wrote the story, I'm like, this isn't real. This is not real.
Meaning reality itself?
Itself. And so let me show you this. Simulation theory, at the very foundation, believes this. They believe there is no matter. They believe this is a simulation.
They who?
The scientists,
Okay.
the people who believe simulation theory, the very foundation of it, that there is no matter, because it's a simulation. Do you get that part? Or
Absolutely.
Okay. And so I'm really thinking about this. And I realized that Mary Baker Eddy was basically talking about simulation theory in 1875. Okay? But here's the thing. Think about, this is how you can understand it. If you think about when you dream, there is no question in your mind when when you're in the dream, you will believe it 100%. And I'm going to tell you something that happened to me. It only happened once, but it got my full attention. I fell asleep and I woke up right away in the dream. I was in a little house. There was a table, and I walk up to the table knowing for a fact it's not there. I know I'm dreaming. I know it's in my consciousness. I knock on the table and it acts like a table. And I can't make it not act like a table. And I look underneath and everything is exactly the way it should be. Like if you'd asked me to describe it or create a picture of this table, I've been like, well, I don't know, this might go here. Everything was perfect. And when I woke up, I realized you cannot tell the difference. You cannot tell the difference
between what is a dream,
and your waking reality. You can't tell the difference. The dream functions exactly like your waking world.
Absolutely. This just came to me, Heather. Oh my God, so much is going on here. There is a quote by, I believe her name is Joan Borisenko, who wrote the book, Minding Your Body, Mending Your Mind, I believe, in which she said the body does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. That also has hallmarks of the same thing that we're talking about, meaning that what the body is reacting to almost proves that it's a simulation, because there's no distinction between real and imagined. Right. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. So if you can get your head around the idea that this is not real, and if you look at anything going on in quantum physics, it's so clear. Like, how could it be real? How could the physical reality be real and then act the way it does? Like, how can one, you probably know these things better than I do, but just the things that can happen, like that split test where, depending on what
double slit experiment, yeah.
Yes, and where the I forget how to, but it had to do with waves and particles, and whether it would show up as a wave or a particle.
Well, it's wave particle duality is what it is.
And
yeah.
Perfect. See, I knew you'd be good at this. Thank you.
Yeah, but you have the gist of it. You absolutely do. Oh my God, we need to do a show just dedicated on simulation theory. But I'm going to have you wind that up, and then I want to get into some of the work you're doing as it relates to all of this stuff.
Okay. Woo. So anyhow, one thing I want to really explain so everyone can get the gist of this. Imagine that you have, like, if you've had a sore throat or something, and notice that you imagine what's going to happen before it happens. So if you think you're getting sick, you might go, oh no, I'm going to get sick. I'll be in bed for a week or whatever. I'm going to get a cold. And someone else might go, oh, I'm going to take some garlic and this and that, and I'll be fine by tomorrow. And each person experiences what they imagined into reality.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
100%.
So, so here's the thing. Quantum physics basically says everything is energy. And one of the easiest ways to recognize this is that the only solid part of the atom, so to speak, is the nucleus, and everything else is empty space and then the electrons, right? And proportionately, the distance from the nucleus to the electrons is the same as from the Earth to the stars, supposedly. But let's just roll with that. So, from what I understand, if you put together all of the nucleuses of all the human beings on the planet, it's the size of a grain of rice. And if you put together all the nuclei of the entire planet, it's the size of a sugar cube. And everything else is pure energy. Okay? So the thing that science does not do is they never tell you, they don't define the energy. So I define it as love. God is love. And so I'm saying that this energy is love. And if I come from that perspective, that the energy here is love, then it changes everything. Because now we're in a simulation, you are dreaming this, but here's the thing, it makes perfect sense when you get the hang of it. What if we are going from one dream reality into another, right? Well, that means that nothing ever happens that is this horrible thing you think happened. Like you are going to wake up from it. You're playing this game here. And the whole thing about this game is not to come here and learn. You are God consciousness. You are love consciousness. That
Yeah.
is you, right?
Yeah. I'm with you
And
100%. Yeah.
I know
I'm
it's so
agreeing with you.
exciting.
As a journalist, I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because we have conversations here on Higher Journeys. Look, all that you are saying, and kudos to you for your incredible distillation, but this is really perennial philosophy, Heather. You will find this, frankly, in every indigenous culture in their own form and
Yeah.
language, and even in many of our monotheistic religions in some form or fashion. This idea that, I mean, it's the who is it, the Mayans, or it's not the Mayans, it may be, that says reality is Maya, meaning an illusion.
Oh,
We
oh,
go
that's in
from one
India.
level of a dream to
Mm-hmm.
another. You could even take the
Yep.
work of my dear friend Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, who has said
Yeah.
that repeatedly. We just had
Yep.
a show a few weeks ago in which we talked about that. And so all of these sort of poetically articulated things in our ancient text to modern day are intimating the same thing,
Right.
that there's really no difference between the dream that we're told we're having versus you and I talking right now. This
Yeah.
is another level of the dream, but a dream nonetheless. So
Yes,
yeah, it's
that's
it's really
exactly right.
stunning.
And here's why it's important to understand that. Because when you wake up from a dream, it doesn't matter what happened. You immediately go, "Oh, it's not real." And you don't worry about it, do you? Like in general, you recognize, like if you go to your therapist and you say, "I dreamed I had this horrible argument with my boyfriend," they don't go, "Well, bring him in for couple therapy." She says, or he says, "How do you feel about that?" Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the most important thing. You wake up and you are not waking up into the physical reality that you think you're waking up into. You're shifting from one dream consciousness to another. And what that means is that no matter what's going on in your here and now, in your waking world or your waking dream, if you will look at it like a dream. So when my clients come to me and they go, "So this was happening to me," and da 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 da, I say, "Okay, I'm your therapist. You dreamed that. Tell me, how do you feel about it?" And guess what? Everybody has a feeling about it. Everybody. Nobody goes, "Well, I don't have any feel." No, no, they have feelings about it, right?
Mhm.
And we start to work with those feelings. Well, think about it. What if every problem you thought you had, you brought it back to yourself, recognized they were your own feelings, and that you work on your feelings? You don't try to change somebody. You don't try to fix the situation. You
Right.
just change how you feel.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
this
that's
is this.
why it's
Yeah.
so important to understand this. And
Right.
thank
It
you for
is.
bringing it up.
Well, the part that I think is really fascinating of all this, let's go with this hypothesis that the reality that we think we're living as a waking conscious reality is still just a dream, if you take the attitude of when you have a dream and you wake up from the dream, say it's a nightmare, and you're like, you finally realize it's a nightmare, and you say, I'm not going to worry about it. It was just a dream.
That's right.
Let's juxtapose that to the physical reality where something devastating happens. You realize it's just a dream.
Mhm.
It will not have the impact that it would had you continue to sustain the feeling that you
That's
had,
right.
because now you understand it's just a dream, so it isn't real either. So question for you, Heather,
Yeah.
does this mean that ultimately when people, because people are dealing with myriad challenges in this physical dream we're having,
Hmm. Hmm.
can they use this to apply to start to remold the reality, knowing that it's just a dream?
Yeah.
It's not a static, fixed state. Very
Right.
holographic, by the way, in the way this is being described. But your
Right.
thoughts on that?
Well,
How,
I actually have a great idea. And I have to just tell you that I have been in the giving business for a long time. And
I
I
believe that.
created something called How to Feel Better When Things Get Worse years and years ago. And the reason I want to tell this is that I put it online for free with this program called the Giving Game. And my friend Leo, the guy from the Love Island thing, had a really incredible experience where I just walked him through some stuff that I do. And he said, Heather, you have to get this out there. And so I created a real program, not my kind of, doing my best, but I created a real program. And it's like $100, not a big deal. However, after I spoke to you, Spirit comes right in and says, Heather, just give it away. Give away how to feel better when things get worse. Because, and I'll explain why. Because even if whether you do the other program or not, and this explains other things, but this foundational audio, it's 70 minutes long. If you do it, it works. And let me explain this, because I would love for people to know how to do this, because you hear inspiring things and you don't know what to do with it. Like,
Right.
great, I love it, I'm inspired, but now what, right? So here's what happened. I met a man at a conference named Wally Minto, and he wrote this book called The Results Book. And in it was a chapter, or is a chapter, it's out of print though, it's called the OK concept. And he calls it the greatest problem solving secret in the universe. And it is. And basically, it's a 20-minute talk where he explains that if you let things be okay and you recognize this is just what is, then you pull this fearful negative energy out of it, right? And so you just neutralize what's happening. So I realized that I wasn't remembering these things. Like I'd see it, I go, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to let it be okay, and I'd forget. So I decided, especially being an actress and memorizing things, I'm like, I
Mm.
am going to memorize this. So, I recorded the whole thing, I memorized it. Oh, I didn't get to the memorization part, and this is what you're going to find interesting. I listened every single day to the full 20 minutes. Every day it would remind me to go, it's okay, it's okay. And then one day something happened that was very upsetting for me. And I'd been doing this the whole time. And it was something really simple. I was with a really good friend. I had my baby. We're at the zoo. He takes me to my favorite place on the creek to eat lunch. And all of a sudden, I realized I have to be up at the ski lodge to meet her dad, and I needed to get cash for him. And I rush up there, and I only have one day a week off. The rest of the time, I'm taking care of her. And that week off, I was usually working and doing massages and things like that and paying the bills. So I was pretty exhausted in general. And I get up there and he's like, oh, thanks for the money. Hi, honey. Hi, baby Amelia. And he goes, hey, I'm not feeling like taking her today. And I knew that he had done that on purpose, that he'd let me come all the way up there with
Mm.
this money. And my whole body was like, it's okay. Just like that. And I was like, oh, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything was going to happen. I just thought I was going to memorize something, and my whole body's fine. I said, okay, well, we'll just
Wow.
go in the pool and go swimming. We did. He joined us. We got out of the pool. He says, you know what? Now, you have to understand, he had never done more than take her one day a week for a year.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, he says, you know what? thank you so much for taking her today. I will take her for the next 3 days if you bring her tomorrow. I'm going, yeah. So now I'm on to something, and I start sharing this with people, and everybody starts to have these amazing experiences take place when they
Love
do
it.
the whole thing. And I'm like, don't skip a day. So this is what I want to tell everybody. I'm going to set this up so that everybody can listen to it. You can go do the OK concept yourself. But here's the trick. Do it every day. So I didn't know for 5 years that I had created a new neural pathway in my brain, which is what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about.
Mhm.
But here's the thing. Nobody has ever connected this repetition that creates the new neural pathway in the brain with the OK concept. They're talking about meditation, but it's easy to meditate and then go off and be yourself again. I mean,
Absolutely.
and it
Yeah.
can work, but it's no guarantee. Well, here's the thing. This works every time. Nobody has ever come to me and said it doesn't work because I would go, did you do it? And they'd go, no, I've been too busy. So, so that's how powerful it is. You let things be okay. And what you're kind of seeing from the stories I've told you is that this was it was like that egg cracking open and just realizing that there was nothing I could do. And I happened to just step into that so that when the OK concept came to me, it made so much sense. And I was like, that's what I did. Like a lot of times I didn't know what I was doing until I
Mhm.
looked back and I saw it.
The OK concept may be the key to shifting reality.
It is true.
That just came to me.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it
I
happens.
love
I
it.
can't wait for you to try it because
Oh,
when you
well, you
try
knew
this,
I was going to ask, didn't you? Tell us where people can get it. We're winding down. So
okay,
Heather, I know people are going to want to reach out to you. Where can they find you? Where can they get this? Tell us, give us the goods. Give us the
okay,
goods.
okay. Go to theresultsprogram.com. And there, I'm in the process of setting this up right now, but it should be done by the time anybody sees this. But it will be there. Um, in fact, we'll put a link in the description box. So we'll give them a specific link so that people can find that. And the other thing that came up that I want to share with you just really quickly is I have this beautiful audio book called The Game. And
Mm.
it's really unusual because I created it first back in 2017 as an interactive audiobook game app.
Wow.
And I did this because I wanted teenagers to be able to have fun learning these concepts. And it was a great idea. The problem was that the person who did all the programming for me, it was done in a framework that didn't work. And a lot of other, coders knew about. I mean, they didn't know at the time, but eventually they said, yeah, you can't use that framework. And you have to pay to keep the app going. And I had
Of course.
everything free because I wanted it to get out to kids and high schools
Right.
and all kinds of things. And so ever since 2017, or whenever I took it offline, finally, um, people loved it, but it was glitchy. It was just glitchy. And that's kind of weird when you're playing a game and it glitches out on you. So I
Right.
just took it offline. Well, literally, after I talked to you about, in fact, this was only yesterday that this hit me. All of a sudden, I get this download. It's like, Heather, not only do we want you to give away the audiobook, but we want you to give away this game and you can set it up in YouTube. So I go to Chat GPT and I went, is this possible?
My new
And
best
Chat
friend.
GPT says, you bet. It just goes, here's how you do it. And you give them the binary choices on the end screen and they can choose A or B. And I'm going, oh my gosh.
Don't
So
you just love it? Oh my
so it's
goodness
all
alive.
going to be there. It's all going to be on the results program. I'll make it so that people can find it and it'll be in the link and it'll be for free. And I'm
I love it.
excited for people to get to do this. And by the way, for parents, there are so many parents who love listening to this story. So you'll have the choice of just listening to the story or listening to, doing the game, right? But I have had so many parents say that they listen to it with their 13, 14, 15-year-old and they love it because they get into these conversations about everything that's in there. And it's all this deep truth And the weird thing that we'll talk about another time is that it is narrated in second person
Mm,
because I did it to be game like. But what happened, which we'll talk about later, is that it affects people in the most phenomenal way because when you're listening to a story, the left brain takes a holiday. It goes, okay, whatever. Now, the right
makes
brain is
sense.
taking in these deep truths,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It goes right into the subconscious. And I had a neuroscientist explain this to me because all these people were having these huge breakthroughs. And I'm like, what is happening? And she said, Heather, you're hypnotizing them,
Yeah,
right?
that makes
You were
sense.
feeling this, you were
Yeah.
feeling that. And not in a way that puts you to sleep at the wheel, but like it's going straight in because the left brain is going, yeah, whatever. How about that? I
And
mean,
it's usually
it's
the right
mind blowing.
brain that's very, yeah, whatever. That's interesting. Left brain is like,
Yeah.
ging, 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 ging. Right brain's like,
Yeah.
"Er." I
And
love it.
because it's an audio book, you can listen with your eyes closed and think about it. You have nothing to do but imagine.
Yeah.
And we are going to get into this imagine thing someday because, oh my goodness, your imagination is everything. And I
I,
will say this entire world that we are in was created by God's
yeah,
imagination. And that's why when you go into your imagination, you're getting into the element that it was created in. So you're going into imagination and boom, you can change things. Seriously. And there's a thing in the results program called ETC, which is emotional transformation code, where you'll
yes.
hear people talk about this. And it's just amazing
And
because
this is on your YouTube channel, right? Got to give us your YouTube
well,
channel as well.
Well, yeah, my YouTube channel, there are some of those on there, but if you go to the results program, you'll hear testimonials.
Okay.
And
Oh,
these testimonials will give you an idea that this happens in one session by
mm,
not going into analysis, but going into imagination. And it's like recoding a game. Like if you go in and you're always turning left all the time when you play a game, and all of a sudden you go right, everything to the left shuts down. You don't sit there and worried about the 30 years that you made that choice going left and what happened going left. It shuts down. You're going to the right. You're having a whole new experience. And that happens to people in one session, and they can learn how to do it. So I'm
what a
excited about it.
repository, Ms. Heather Noel, you have over there. We're going to make sure everybody goes over there. Listen,
Thank
we could
you.
go on forever, but we've got to wind it down so people can hurry up and go over there and see what
Okay.
they're missing. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
Heather, I am just so incredibly impressed, not only with your stories. Well, the stories are the stories, but what you've done with them, what you have done in service to humanity, frankly,
Oh, thank you.
that is just incredibly important right now because a lot of people are feeling so despondent. If you've watched my show, you know we've done quite a few on the let's just call it the extreme challenges that people are going through and the antidote, of course. But things like this are what people need right now, and to be reminded that some of the most powerful, some of the most heavy challenges can be solved in the most simplest of ways. Two
Yeah.
words I will use that are everything to borrow from you: love and imagination.
Yeah.
And we have them
Yep.
both innately. So let's
Yep.
use them, everyone.
Yeah.
Heather, I want to
Thank
thank you for
you.
coming to Higher Journeys, and
Thank you so
Godspeed
much.
to you in your endeavors. And Godspeed to all of you watching out there. We love you so much. Take good care. Bye
Thank you,
now.
Alexis. Bye.